Sometimes people want an increase of their mat, and what they need to do is stay where it's uncomfortable and work through their issues, because what will happen is as they work through their issues, the dosage they have may turn out in the end to be too high because they don't need to be medicated as much because they're not dealing with as much. So we are a strong believer at our ministry, at Redeemed Life Ministries, that we need to use the good of psychiatric care when that has been ascertained by a medical professional. But at the same time, you can be over-medicated so that you feel nothing. And that's not good for the soul, to walk around with a chemical smile on your face. There are times when we do suffer, and we need to say, okay, this is my time to embrace this and focus on the Lord. One of my favorite novels about suffering is by Elizabeth Goudge in her book, The Scent of Water. The central character in The Scent of Water is Mary, and Mary has a depression that revisits her year in, year out. Usually around winter, she has probably seasonal affective disorder, but that wasn't a very good sort of thing to write a novel about back then. They didn't even have that terminology. But at one point, Mary is in the midst of her deep suffering, and the local priest, her vicar, comes to visit her. And she asks him a why question. Why does God let us suffer like this? She asks the vicar. And this priest says, my dear young lady, how should I know? Job didn't know, but he repented in dust and ashes. He says to her, if you lose your reason, you lose it into the hands of God. And he later encourages her to pray these three prayers. Lord, have mercy, thee I adore, into thy hands. Lord, have mercy, thee I adore, into thy hands. Many years ago, I mentioned that I had an experience of suffering where I didn't sleep for 10 days. Well, this was about 10 years after I had that one experience of locking myself in my apartment. What happened is a deep pain and anxiety came up in my soul that came up in the context of a conflictual relationship that I was having, that I was trying to sort through a lot of issues. And in the midst of that, I accessed a time when I had been left in a hospital for a month with an upper respiratory infection. And my mom had always told me that I had been hospitalized. And so I called her, and she shared with me I was there for a month, and the doctors would not let her visit me. And so for a month I didn't see her. And so I went into a kind of abandonment depression and had a sense of abandonment as an 18-month-old child. And my experience here is that these repressed memories of infantile separation came forward, and this abandonment came forward, and what's called a pathogenic secret was revealed. And the secret that I had, which I had always had, was that I would access a type of pain that would cause me to lose my mind. And as I was experiencing this pain, this is when a friend of mine sent me Father Michael Scanlon's tape. You know how I told you I wore it out? Well, I played that tape sometimes 3 and 4 times a day for 10 days. And I listened to Mike Scanlon's teaching, and God bless him. It really did save my life. But I had also just read this book by Elizabeth Goudge, The Scent of Water, and had memorized these prayers. Lord, have mercy, thee I adore, into thy hands. And I'm a little dramatic, and at one point I just was in so much pain, I was clutching my chest, and I threw myself on my bed, and my head was hanging over the edge of my bed, and I said, all right, Lord, my head is going to fall off my neck with this pain. I hope your hands are there on my floor to catch it. And I started praying, Lord, have mercy, thee I adore, into thy hands. And I prayed that over and over. And I realized my head isn't going to fall off the edge of my neck. And then that next morning, this was Saturday, I went to church. And in going to church, I went to the Lord's Supper And I went up to the communion rail to receive his body and blood. And that day, nothing ministered to me in church. Not the beautiful music, not the fine sermon, nothing. But it was as I took the body and blood of the Lord that the presence of the Lord came to me. After I consumed, I sat down and prayed. And in the spirit, I had this sense of rough carpenter hands with a wound, wiping my tears away. And it was the presence of Jesus there, and it lifted. It was so remarkable. It was amazing. Now, there are all sorts of secrets that we have, what are sometimes called pathogenic secrets. It's a big psychological word, which means pathogenic. It's the genesis of your pathology. I'm not so sure there's one magic secret that unlocks everything. This didn't unlock everything for me. But there can be the fear of death, the fear of aging, the fear of someone else's death. There can be this fear of facing a repressed memory, and the Lord can show that to you. But it is the true self that grows as we determine to suffer redemptively in his presence. And it is there as we focus up and out that when we're suffering, he really does meet us. But that can only happen, friends, for you in your time. You can't make it happen. And I guarantee you, between now and your entry into glory, unfortunately, you will have these times of suffering. But they're not to be embraced as some kind of morbid spiritual journey you have to trek through. You always have to focus on the Lord, and that the suffering leads to resurrection. There is always hope. Always. It is only the false self that has this false anticipation that I'll never suffer again. That's the magical thinking of the false self. The true self says, all right, maybe I won't try and hang on to life and get all the gusto that I can out of life. Maybe I'll just hold life a little more gingerly and take what comes in the presence of the Lord. It's easier said than done. Hebrews 13:5, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. That's a Bible verse I memorized early on in my life when I was a teenager. And at one point I shook my fist at God and I said, I want you to leave me, and that popped into my head. And I thought, I can't even tell him to go. He's going to hang out. Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. Hebrews 13:5. So in redemptive suffering, friends, we suffer with this outwardly directed focus on Jesus. I can't say it enough times. I wish I didn't have to suffer ever again, but I know when that time comes, he'll be there, because he always is there. I just have to remember to look up and out. God bless you.
In Habakkuk 1:3, the prophet asks, why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrong? It is sometimes as we suffer before the Lord that we ask those big why questions. And it is important that as we tell our story, as we give our testimony before Jesus, that we speak from our true voice in our true self about what is truly bothering us. And sometimes we simply ask that question, why? We don't always get the answer that we expect. Like Jesus on the cross, he asks, my God, why have you forsaken me? But God doesn't give an immediate answer. It comes later in the resurrection. Next time, in Alive Again, we will talk about self-hatred. And there we will see how it is as we confess our weaknesses before the Lord and accept that they're there, that we encounter his grace and his power for living. Meanwhile, remember, it is as we tell our story in the voice of our true self with an outwardly directed focus on Jesus that we suffer in a redemptive way, in a way that makes us more like him. God bless you.
Holy water pouring from your skies fills a river in my heart, cleansing all that's within. Let it wash across across my brow and touch my eyes as I turn away from darkness and lay down my sin. Sweet rain, let it fall, let it fall. Cleansing, healing, let it fall over all of us. Let it wash through every room within my heart. May my imagination be purified. In your body may I fully take my part. Lord, hear me and answer me now.